Yeah, I was out climbing on the roof, hanging prayer flags with my boys.
Well, that's great, actually.
It was fun, actually. You're kidding, August 3rd, too?
August 3rd.
Do you know the name of the day and my best book on that?
No.
There's a wonderful book by a guy called Goldschneider,
Uh-huh.
an astrologer, and every day in the year has a name and a description.
Uh-huh.
And of course, it's general because, of course, it's not on a specific horoscope.
Yeah.
But they're really horrible. We have read them to many people over the years from this. It's called The Magic Language of Birthdays.
Yeah.
And some of them you don't want to read to somebody. So we sort of check it first before we read it publicly. But anyway, you and I are called, our day is called the Day of the Dangerous Quest. And it means that we have to be cautious
Yeah.
because sometimes we undertake things just because they're dangerous. But
Wow.
usually it's because we do good things which are tend to may have an element of danger or difficulty about them.
Yeah.
So that's August 3rd. Leo is a day of the dangerous quest.
That's interesting. So actually, so my backstory is when I was 19 years old, I got into Dharma, but very
Yeah,
superficial. I didn't have a background, no parents, nothing like this. And I read about Buddhism and I immediately felt like I was home. I read some books and I was like, I'm going to do what the Buddha did
right.
and I'm going to become homeless. And I got rid of everything and I got a backpack and I traveled for 3 years.
Really?
Yeah, I lived on the streets.
Where'd you go? You went to Thailand or something?
No. I didn't have any money. I just stayed in America. I just hitchhiked.
Oh,
Uh, I lived
oh,
on I lived on the streets. I met
oh,
street kids,
wow.
but then I lived in the woods as well and meditated. And I had a little Dharma book with me. And
So you were a true mendicant, in other words.
yeah, but I didn't know what any of that was. But yes, I wanted to be a mendicant. And
Well, that's what it is. When they translate monk, that's a mistranslation. The bhikshu means mendicant,
yes,
someone
mendicant.
who eats by alms.
Yeah,
And so and mendicant is better also because it's gender neutral. So otherwise you have to say monk and nun, and that's no good.
no, I
So
agree.
you were a mendicant. That's good. I was a mendicant too.
Well, I was a mendicant, but then I got frustrated, and
Yeah,
I came home after 3.5 years, and a friend had a video of yours on. It was your 3-part series of Tibet, and I didn't know anything about Tibet. And in
really.
that video, you said too many Westerners go and they meditate, but they don't have anything to meditate on, and they
Right.
have to study. And I was
That's
like,
right.
my mind blew, and I was like, that's it. And I spent the next year just building that education
Oh,
in
good.
Tibetan. So that's you. So thank you for that.
I'm so glad. Oh, you're very welcome. I'm
And
delighted.
August 3rd, I didn't know that at the time. There was a connection.
Very good. Excellent. Happy to hear about that.
Yeah, and so you were a mendicant, and I really want to hear about this time in Dharamshala with you. Well, first, let's start. How did you why Buddhism for you? How did that come into your life?
Well, when I was, first of all, I ran away from prep school at 17
Hmm.
to join Fidel Castro's revolution.
Yeah.
But lucky for me, they didn't accept my enrollment because I was so green. I mean, really ridiculous. Me and a Mexican friend. I was very skinny, and I was 6'3" with a weight of like a 160 or 170.
Hmm.
And my friend was just 5'3", and he weighed 180.
Yeah.
So they said, my Mexican friend. So they said in Miami Beach, where they were recruiting mercenaries and people, they said, okay, Don Quixote and Sancho Panza came to save the revolution. Well, you guys can do something better than that. You'll be killed in 5 minutes in the Sierra Madre. So anyway, we didn't do that. So I first was that, and then then I did go to college. Finally, as a sophomore, I never graduated high school, but I had advanced standing because I was at a fancy prep school.
Yeah.
So I got in as a sophomore, and they didn't care. After a year or two later, and then I was just reading on my own, and then I gravitated to Buddhism. But in a way, more Indian than Tibetan, like
Yeah.
sutras, ancient sutras, and things. I wasn't a Tibet fanatic, and so then I dropped again out of college, and because I got married and everything. But anyway, I dropped, and my wife at the time wouldn't go, so I divorced and left my family like imitating Siddhartha, and went to India
Yeah.
But then when I got to India, nobody in India knew anything about Buddhism. They're just a bunch of swamis and whatever. Oh, Buddha, that's just Vishnu, and we don't care
Yeah.
about Buddha. But then the Tibetans had come out. This was 62,
Wow.
61, 62. So they had just come into exile. And then, boy, when I met them, that was homecoming. And I've been with them ever since, in one way or another. And I was insisting on being an actual mendicant, and took a vow and everything. Although, oddly, one of the first great teachers I had was a Mongolian guy. And he said, well, I know you want to be a monk, and you're very sincere.
Yeah.
You want to be a mendicant, you get along, but that's not your karma, and this country doesn't have mendicants, Buddhist mendicants, and you have another path, but so don't formally do it. You're living like that, but don't formally do it. But I insisted because I thought, but then there was no Tibetan culture to be a mendicant in, and there was no Indian Buddhist thing particularly, and then nothing in America at that time. So I didn't last anyway. Then I got married again, went become a professor instead. That way I could study and practice Buddhism my whole life without and somehow by teaching in a non-proselytizing way, the way you have to do in academia, I could have a livelihood, and do what I love, which is studying the Dharma, Especially Tsongkhapa. I really like Tsongkhapa. He's so great. He's the greatest thinker. Really, he's the Renaissance human on the planet, I swear. I mean, there are tons of them, of course, but he really was like a trigger, Manjushri, Monju Bosatsu. Did you do a lot of Zen or something at some point?
Yeah, I was raised doing martial arts and I did Zen.
Oh, good. Oh, great. Yeah.
That's what I
So
was doing on the
in the
road.
Zendo, you have a Monju Bosatsu behind you,
Hmm.
ready to give you a whack if you
Yeah.
if you if you relax on the path, right?
Yeah.
If you fall asleep or anything, there's a
Yeah.
Monju beside you, even in the Zendo, and not in the Butsudo.
Yeah. I had
So
to.
okay, so that's my story, and then.
Well,
Then I married, and then we had four more children. I had a daughter by the first wife, and then I had four more children, a bunch of grandchildren, teaching,
mhm.
and developing a stronger and stronger relationship with Dalai Lama as he became more and more amazing. Initially, I was not very impressed with him because I had this old Mongolian guy, and then he was so interested in Western things when we met. And I was speaking Tibetan fluently by that time because I studied a little bit before I met him, and I took to Tibetan like a duck, And so I would tell him about the West, in Tibetan, and then he would send me to his old teachers, and so we were like fellow students, and we would argue actually and stuff.
Oh, really?
He enjoyed that. I didn't because I wasn't that reverent about him at first,
Yeah.
And sometimes his courtiers would be annoyed with me. They thought I was too. I was actually too I didn't grovel around, And I still don't because we maintain that friendship, and he likes that because everybody else does kind of too, don't give him a straight answer. Everything is great, great, great,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you needed to know. You had questions.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we have still that kind of a thing, and he'll usually pick at me when I say something. Oh no, that's this and that, and then I'll also debate him, and then we'll agree to disagree, and so on,
So
which
did
is
he?
really nice.
That's one. Did you take ordination with him
Yeah.
that time when you were in
I
India?
was a big disappointment. I was the first person in Western world that he ordained, and actually the old Mongolian told him not to ordain me. He warned him. He said, "Well, I brought him to meet you. I want you to help him study here in Dharamsala instead of where he has his monastery in New Jersey, actually." And he said, "But and he wants to be a monk, but don't make him a monk because he won't stay." And that's not our Tibetan system now. But then he had to say, "Well, you're the Dalai Lama. You decide. I'm just an old Mongolian." But that old Mongolian, I call him doing my autobiographical sort of thing that I'm working on nowadays. I call him my Mr. Miyagi. Remember Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid?
Yeah.
He looks like Mr. Miyagi. They look like each other actually. Although he was a Kalmyk Mongol, a Western Mongol, 35 years in Tibet. Very deep person.
Yeah. That's so
Passed
wonderful.
Passed away 40 years ago.
That you got to meet this first wave, and when they came in to India, like you were getting really right out of Tibet. It's like you were
Yes.
there and you were ordained. You're wearing the robes around Dharamshala.
Yes.
I mean, how just it's amazing.
It was amazing. It was really
Yeah.
great. But I was also an insufferable pain in the ass, actually, to
Yeah.
them. Well, they loved me too because I really loved the Dharma. I was
Yeah.
understanding pretty a lot of stuff, and I spoke incredibly fluently,
Yeah.
and I could debate with them all. We would debate day and night, but also I was over purist. Like don't eat and after 12 o'clock. What is this? What is
Oh
this
yeah.
evening meal for Tibetans?
Yeah.
What's that about? And then like I even told the Dalai Lama he should quit worrying about the politics because he's a bhikshu.
Yeah.
Get along, and we're just monks. And I said he could do more for his people just being a world guru. When he grew up. But although I wasn't that impressed with him as a guru at the first, I am nowadays, but not then.
Right.
'Cause we were, as I said, we were kind of fellow students. He is 6 years older, but we were sort of like that. He did, and he's like that. He has the resilient personality, and so he doesn't always insist on being somehow superior to you, which unfortunately many of the lamas do. They act like you're a lesser. Unfortunately, some people they think enlightenment or their Roshi certificate makes them your superior or something like that, which is definitely a big mistake. Actually, it is. But in a way, they can help you, and they're better at some things. But
Yeah.
but the great teacher doesn't think they're superior to their student. No way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a Dharma friend, I've heard.
That's right, Kalyana Mitra. That is the original model in Buddhism. Of
Mhm.
course, in Zen, Zen is secretly tantric, actually,
Mhm.
because that thing about just sitting, you're a Buddha, that's what you call goal vehicle practice instead of causal vehicle practice.
Mhm.
And that's the essence of Tantra. You
Yeah.
imagine that you're at the fruitional state, and then it puts you in a cognitive dissonance sort of situation and a lot of pressure. Yeah, so that makes it kind of, but because Tantra somehow never took off in China in
Mhm.
any kind of big way, probably um, because of the thing about women that they had, the Chinese elite. And Tantra is very much have to pay attention to the women.
I've,
And not that it has to be sexual, but the women have a big role.
yeah, I've been talking to a lot of Taoists and about the like alchemical practices and stuff, which seem
Yeah,
tantra
yeah, they do
in the
have a lot of stuff.
Taoist background.
Yes, yes. Yeah, so they have like Taoist Tantra, but Buddhist
Yeah.
Tantra sort of skipped China
Mhm.
and it did big in Tibet with Kukai and Shingon and all that. And
Mhm.
even Chen Tai from China, when it got to Japan,
Yeah.
they got very much into Tantra.
Yeah.
But China, they never did really
Oh.
until the nationalist period
Mhm.
when they were sending people to Tibet and beginning to really learn about it. But even then, they were more interested in the Tibetan Sutrayana stuff. So that's nowadays. Of course, the lamas are very, but there's some of the big Taiwanese, shurfus. They are jealous. They're not into tantra, but they try to keep them in Pure Land and Shan. But they'll get to like tantra because it is likable.
Yeah.
Tantra's really big focus is
Right.
moving into the subtle body
Yes.
and dealing with the pranas and the vayus, the chis, in
Mhm.
East Asia say chi, the chi powers, and then the 10 different ones inside the body and the chakras and things like that, which
Mhm.
is sort of the link between the body and that, and then you sort of get into a different sense of time,
Mhm.
and so then that's why it packs like meditationally like a million deaths into a single lifetime or something like that. It isn't that it abridges or it dispenses with the bodhisattva thing of three incalculable aeons of lifetimes to evolve the body into
Mhm.
Buddhahood. But by going into the subtle body and then sort of working on a subtle plane like a dream body yoga, something like
Mhm.
that. Because in a dream, you can die 100 times during a dream night if you
Yeah.
become a lucid dreamer. And so Tantra is a really sophisticated, fabulous Indian Tantra, which Tibetans have kept and refined very beautifully. It's
Right.
not just rituals, and it's certainly not just sexuality, although it's dealing with the unconscious, the id, eros and thanatos, and the id is
Yeah.
dealing with that, of course. But that's how the acceleration occurs: is that you go into this area around the process of death, and that's why it also has all this stuff about the between, the after death, the bardo,
Yep.
famous Tibetan stuff. But that came from India. They had a bardo in India, Antara Baba, they call it.
Mhm.
But they didn't use it in a popular way like in Tibet because India was always a more pluralistic social situation, and Buddhism was always like a counterculture in India, like it was always in East Asia, because there was always a king with the army and the macho culture, in those other countries. But Tibet, the macho culture was completely subsumed by the macho mendicants.
Yeah.
Eventually, it took time, but eventually they did. And that's why Tibet preserved the Siddha traditions of India very well, very heavily.
So we have the tantra side of stuff has been presented from the Tibetans, but I feel like back to Tsongkhapa and the importance of the study and and
Yes.
I feel like that's a little bit neglected in the West right now.
Well, yeah, well, because the Western people are arrogant and they don't want to study anything.
That's right.
And especially, for example, even the translators,
Yeah.
the three trainings,
Yep.
right in Theravada,
Yep.
they never say the three higher educations, which is what they are. The word shiksha, shiksha means education. Even today in Hindi, it's the Department of Education in India. It's the shiksha department. And those are educations in ethics, educations in mind, and educations in wisdom, which means science.
Yeah.
Natural science. That is,
Yeah.
it's psychology and natural science.
Mhm.
And Westerners think they're the smartest people. Like I tell my Buddhist studies colleagues, and even more now that I'm emeritus, I can say more when I want because they take me less seriously.
Yeah.
But I was always saying that to them, but I didn't gel it quite to the nastiness that I've reached now, which is, you guys do Buddhist studies,
Mhm.
but you really know, and your cardinal principle in Buddhist studies in academia is that Buddha was not enlightened. There's no such thing as a Buddha, actually. It's just what people believing there was and what they do. And why do you know for sure that he wasn't enlightened?
Yeah.
Because he didn't have a PhD from Harvard or Yale, and you do, and you think modern people know reality much better than anybody, which is wrong.
Mhm.
Modern people are actually insane. They're actually crazy. Do you get the Buddha Dharma publication, by the way?
Yeah.
The latest one, they have a nice study by Roger Jackson,
Mhm.
who's a retired professor from Carleton College, and who I like. I've always liked Roger, and it's really great study about the whole issue of former and future life and people who say they're Buddhists, and then a bachelor who always annoys me by pretending he's big, but he's shout and scream how he's not a Buddhist.
Yeah. Stephen
He
Batchelor.
will, but yet he's supposed to be a big authority on Buddhism. And he says Buddha didn't even care about former and future life. It's just being here now. I mean, it's such bullshit.
Yeah.
And how you're going to, and that's because they just think being enlightened is some kind of smartness. It's some
Well,
change of mind, not the change of your body.
right.
To be a Buddha, you have a body that you can be simultaneously 1,000 beings easily,
Yeah. Yeah.
easily. There's some of those Hindu gods can do that too. They're not nobody's creator and omnipotent, but they can also multiply their bodies, just
Yeah.
like the Mr. Smith, Agent Smith.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, remember
Nathan.
Agent Smith learns to multiply himself like Neo because he knows the code,
Yeah.
so he can make anything out of the code. That's Nirmanakaya. That's
Yeah.
what Nirmanakaya means. So this kind of materialist people like by Bachelor, he's true. He's not really a Buddhist because he's a materialist. He thinks that's real, and let's be real now, and that's all superstition. And even Roger is a little bit taken in by that, by Roger Jackson. But it's a long article analyzing the different perspectives that different Buddhist teachers and people have quite nicely. And he actually puts Lopez, he puts me in the wrong category, but never mind. But he puts Lopez in a good category where he claims that Lopez says that Buddhism is not fitting into modern science. It's the opposite of modern science. And that's correct, I think. But I'm even more. But then Lopez thinks that because of that, Buddhism is just a religion, and you can't take. There's no such thing as Buddhist science. He will argue that. So he takes the wrong conclusion from that.
Yeah.
But I take the conclusion from that Buddhist science is correct and ours is fucked. And why is that? What do secular materialist people believe in? In fact, what do they have blind faith, non-empirical blind faith in?
That,
What?
that we die and consciousness is just thoughts.
Yeah, they have blind faith in the ultimate reality and prevailing reality of nothing.
Right. That's right.
So, what does that mean? You believe in nothing? It means you're insane
Yeah.
because nothing isn't there.
No.
So, if you think your whole world is based on everything will reduce to nothing, you know, and some energy is going to go and have entropy, since you, in a way, are more sensible with that. You say the conservation of energy, right? Law of conservation of energy, thermodynamics. But then entropy will make it all go wild, you know. But then they actually believe that they are going to be nothing,
Yeah.
which is an insane sentence. It's not even a sane sentence.
No, I
Be
agree.
nothing.
And don't you think this is because of their view on consciousness is so stuck, like it's so small, it's like the thoughts are the person, that's it. They don't
It's
consider.
not just that it's stuck. It's that it's sick. It's insane.
Yeah,
Because if the ultimate reality is nothing, that means we're nothing right now. It's not later when we die. We're now nothing. There's some biological robotry go running around, some kind of AI programmed by the Bible or by the Lotus Sutra or by the Bhagavad Gita or something. You know, it's just a robot, because we are essentially nothing. And that is also why, in my opinion, we have to go. I can't wait, bullshit around about that now, because that's why we destroy this fucking planet.
I agree.
Because who cares? You know, once everybody's dead, they won't know they ever lived, because they're all going to be the nothing.
Yeah,
They're going to be reduced to their actual reality right now, which is nothing.
right.
So therefore, they're unethical. They're amoral, basically, because it doesn't matter what happens, what you do. If you get caught, you have a shorter life, but you'll still be the same nothing as Saint so and so. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
If
well,
you're the most evil person there was.
I
So therefore, burn that oil, man. Burn that coal.
agree.
Joe mentioned, veto the EVs,
I know.
veto the solar energy.
I'm the same here in my neighborhood. I'm really anti-pesticide and trying to get people pollinators. It's like they poison their lawn. It's insane. Like they're just at
Yeah,
war with the environment.
yeah.
I had George Dreyfus on a few months ago, and me and him had a nice conversation about consciousness. You know Dreyfus, the
George
Geshe.
is nice, but George is like he's like a scholastic. He never
Yeah.
wants to commit to anything. He lives
No.
this way and that way, and this the other way and that way. He's very clever, and he used to get really irritated with me. But we were friends, good friends.
Yeah.
But he used to get quite irritated because, you know, he learned the rigid rules of Tibetan debate.
Yes.
And so when you're debating logic, you have to debate from the point of view of the Sautrantika
Hmm.
philosophical level. So if you bring in some tantric evidence, he gets pissed off,
Yeah.
even though you're going to destroy his position, but you did it with material from a wrong zone. You know what I mean? You're just stealing from reality, but not, you know, and that's why I have a new thing I want to call tantric abhidharma.
Oh.
You know, like for example, there's only one book, Mahayana Abhidharma, written by a Sangha, but
Yeah.
otherwise Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, none of them use the term Abhidharma for their heavy-duty philosophy, Madhyamaka and things like that. They don't say
Hmm.
it's Abhidharma.
Right.
You know, Abhidharma is only Theravada,
Yeah.
Nikaya Buddhism. But actually, Abhidharma just means systematized and scientific kind
Right.
of way of teaching. And so Tantra, and you mentioned about study,
Yeah.
but that was a shock to me in my early 30s when I started I had been reciting tantric stuff through my 20s, because that's what young Tibetans do,
Hmm.
although they're studying the exoteric things, sutra. But once I got to tantra, I thought, oh, good, now I'm just going to meditate. I'm going to have bliss. It's going to be great. And then there's a huge amount of stuff to study,
Yeah.
very lot of study. So many shastras,
Yeah.
on tantra, really huge literature.
Yeah.
In fact, the Tibetan collections, both Kanjur and Tenjur, are
Hmm.
like 60% Tantra.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, because Tantra is like neuroscience.
Right.
It's the neuroscience stuff. It's not just
Yeah.
this regular, the course psychology, course
Sure. Sure.
mind psychology. It's the neuroscience as
But
well.
but you need the previous information.
Yes,
Wouldn't
you
you
do.
agree?
Well, not only that, but you need the previous information. You need the previous certain degree of self-restraint
Yes.
about how your impulses can guide your emotions in wrong negative directions. And if you get into these subtle, if you're really going deep, drilling down into your unconscious,
Hmm.
then the eros and thanatos are going to take you for one heavy duty ride.
Yeah.
If you haven't done a little probing of that, even in the exoteric level, which you have to do to get anywhere with any good understanding.
Yeah.
So you definitely have to have some experiential knowledge of emptiness,
Hmm.
and you have to have bodhisattva attitude, therefore, which you will, once you have some real experiential level of emptiness, and you have to have some degree of renunciation. So you need You need the renunciative vows. Even if you're no longer a mendicant, you have to have the layman's Upasika vow. You have to have the Bodhisattva vow. Then you have a lot of the complicated tantric vows. Like they asked Atisha, when he went to Tibet, how are you doing with your Vinaya practices? And he said, oh, my monk Vinaya is no problem. I really keep it really pristine. It's very cool. He says, in my Bodhisattva vow, but boy, it's really hard to keep my tantric vows. And, so, and he was a celibate. And he said monks shouldn't try to practice the higher stages, the perfection stages, or the completion or perfection stage. Shouldn't try. Just the vows, the visualization part. He used to say, because monk will get carried away by passion or aggression, So you need all of that, absolutely. And this whole thing of teaching people madly, giving them initiations and everything. But in a way, it's a natural thing because they're dealing with these incredibly arrogant people who think they're a bunch of natives. They're just some natives from somewhere, some underdeveloped country. And then they want the highest thing. Of course, we deserve the highest thing on the weekend. We want it on the weekend. So then they give them that, and then they say, well, gee whiz, this is a really magical thing. It's really great. You're an inch from Buddhahood. But by the way, now there's 3 years of prerequisites.
Yeah.
And start out with 100,000 prostrations.
Yeah, they don't want to do it.
100,000.
Yeah.
Did you ever do a lot of bows?
Yeah, I did Nungdro and the Fivefold Path and the Drikankaju.
You did? You did 100,000 prostrations?
I did.
You are great. You have a good, strong back.
Well, I wanted to be a monk. I tried to ordain, and my teacher just said, live as a monk. And I did for 3 years. I came back to him. He says, okay, maybe it's not a good idea. In America, you have to work. He's like, but here. And this was Khinchen Gyaltsen Rinpoche, and I was at the Gongchik teaching in Dehradun, and he handed me...
Darjeeling, you said?
No, in Dehradun.
Oh, in Dehradun. Oh, Sakya?
No, Drikankaju.
Drikankaju, oh, fine. Great,
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, and he handed me...
So you did a 3-year retreat, you mean?
Well, I did with my teacher. So he did it with me, though. Like I would go in for like 3 months or 4 months, and then I would come out, and then I would go in. And so I did it in the West at my teacher's place.
Was that Chedzang Rinpoche?
No, not Chet. So I did part of my retreat in Dehradun, and Chedzang Rinpoche was there, but it was his students, Drupan Tenli Ningpo Rinpoche, so a Drupan.
How wonderful.
Yeah,
I love the Drigung Bus. I really like the Drigung Bus.
Yeah, Garchen Rinpoche.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
they don't really want it, the Drigung Bus and the Pangmodu Bus.
Yeah.
They don't really want to be taken over by the Karmapas,
No.
They have their own thing going.
Yeah, they're their own thing. But like they won't give...
Did you read Jimba's great biography of Tsongkhapa? The Land of Snows. Did you read that from Shambhala?
Yes, I have it.
So wonderful. It's really good. Really. All of his donors, big donors, Kagyu, especially Pagmudrubas. The Pagmudrubas, in those days they were they were the kings of central Tibet in those days. Pagmudrubas. They had rebelled against the Sakya hierarchs supported by the Kublai Khan, etc. But the Mongols were leaving, China in the mid 14th century. So then the big shots in Tibet were the Kagyus, and especially Drigong and Pagmodruba. And they were so. I was so surprised. I didn't realize that they were really his supporters, and the fact that he associated himself with Atisha and the Kadampas was typical of him. They were the weaklings politically. But he wasn't interested in the politics. He was not playing that.
He had one Drikung teacher.
Who?
Didn't Tsongkhapa had a Drikung Kaju teacher?
Oh, yeah, of course he had.
Yeah, one of his teachers I think were important to him.
Sure. He had Nyingma, said everybody, 50, 60 teachers.
Well,
and main teacher was Sakyapa. They were pissed off that he didn't do lead his big renaissance with the Sakyas. They were pissed off. They kept sending people to try to bring him back to the fold. Then they would quit Sakya and join him. That made them really mad. But the Drigungpas didn't mind the Kadampas. Everybody in those days really liked the Kadampas. And Atisha, they really respected that.
Yeah.
Because Gampapa was a Kadampa before he followed Milarepa.
No, I did not. Did I know that? I don't know if I knew that he was a Kadampa before.
Yeah, he was. He was a doctor.
Yeah, of course.
He was a medical doctor, and also
he was a doctor.
He was educated in Kadampa monastery.
Milarepa's other student, Rengchumpa and Gampopa.
Rengchumpa? Oh, he's great. I love Ray Trungpa. You
Yeah.
know, I love the 100,000 songs
Yeah.
where Ray Trungpa has that dream.
Hmm.
And, oh no, that was Gampopa's dream. No, but my favorite one, yeah, is the one where Ray Trungpa is getting a little proud because he went to India, and then Milarepa has this thing where he has the rain fall on all of his books. It's very Zen. You know that? Remember that
Yeah,
one?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And he hides inside the
Then
conch
and
shell.
then he gets his books wet by the rainstorm.
Yeah.
Then Milarepa's all dry inside the yak horn, and Ray Trungpa can't get into the yak horn. He can't miniaturize himself. And then he burns Ray Trungpa's books because Ray Trungpa looks at the herd of goats. Remember, which Milarepa magically manifests, and
Hmm.
then Milarepa, then he's completely hates Milarepa, and Milarepa shows all his miracles, different mandalas, and his different chakras, etc. And then finally, Ray Trungpa realizes he was angry with his guru, and he repents and jumps off a cliff. Then he lands about 5 feet down on a terrace, and then Milarepa's flapping his wings. I love that story.
I
It's
love
so
that story
good.
too. I
And then
thought
the
maybe,
death of Milarepa
yeah,
is so far out, where Retrumpa comes, and then they don't want to let him come, and then they can't light the fire until
mhm,
Retrumpa comes, and oh, it's
yeah,
beautiful. But I don't know that much about anything special, particularly through Retrumpa,
right.
than
That's
the
what I'm
general
saying.
Milarepa. I don't know. I just don't know enough about it.
Right. It doesn't seem like there's much. It's kind of shrouded. It's like Gampopa gets the lineage and moves forward, and then Rinpoche
Yeah.
kind of like you don't hear much after that, like as far as lineage or anything goes.
Yes, but probably there's some special thing. Tibetans have so many
Yeah, there's so many.
secret and special things and
Yeah.
thermas and God knows what. It's wonderful. They
Yeah.
have so much magic up there. So it's probably great, some great stuff. I really like new young Kalu. He's kind of he's an internet pal of mine
Hmm.
nowadays, and likes me to come to his yoga classes.
Mm.
He gives yoga classes online. He's very athletic. My God, he looks like he could be a right tackle. Oh, he's so strong. Have you ever seen him do his yoga?
No, I don't know.
The new young Kala? Oh
Yeah.
my God. He has thigh muscles like a weightlifter, where the one on the right part of it and the left part are two separate two chunks of muscle. And yet he sits lotus pretty clear, pretty easy,
Mm.
but he looks really strong. And he's doing these those kind of special true core things, yoga
Yeah.
things,
What?
Tibetan yoga.
So, what do you think about that? It's like I used to be pro, like share and get it out there. Now I'm thinking more like it's like I really think I don't know about. I don't know. I have different thoughts now. It's like I think they serve a particular purpose.
What do you mean? You mean you used to be a big remake, you mean, and you're not now, or what do you mean?
No, not remake. I just thought that there was a reason that they were in the 3-year retreat and given at the time they were given instead of just given openly to everybody. Like before, I thought, oh, this is a good thing, and it's kind of like other yogas and exercise, and it could attract people. And now these days, I'm like, you know what? No, I don't think it makes a lot of sense outside of the the Nungdro and the Mahamudra and the 6 yogas. It's like
Well, that's the ideal way.
right.
But on the other hand, there are some people who don't need exactly that.
Mm,
And actually, about the 3-year thing,
mm-hmm,
I once had a meeting with Nyoshu Kimbo. Do you remember who he was? He
mm-mm,
was very influential. He was an enigma,
mm-hmm,
and he was a teacher of Surya Das and like a
mm,
lot of the like Zongzar Khenze studied with him. They all respected him enormously. Nyoshu
okay.
Kim. He passed away now. And I was with him with Tuku Pema Wangyal, who's one of the big 3-year retreat people in France.
Yeah.
Somehow we all had tea together in Bhutan one time. I don't know how it kind of came about, but it did. And at that time, I was kind of irritated by all the 3-year retreaties because I knew a bunch of people who'd done 3 and even 6 years,
Yeah.
and they weren't authors, they weren't charismatic like Surya Das or something like that, and they were working as carpenters or they living in grandma's attic, and they were fundraising for a Tibetan monastery, but they really had no sort of way to help the world based on supposedly enlightenment,
Mhm.
3 years. So I said to Nyoshu Ken, I said, look, uh, and actually Tuku Pemwanga was right there. So I said, that's really great. These people have this devotion, and then you guys teach them, and they do 3
Yeah.
retreats. But then they get out of the retreat. Then what are they going to do? They're still in their 20s maybe or early 30s.
Yeah.
They don't have any kind of academic degree to teach in a school. They
Right.
don't have a psychological counseling degree to be a psychotherapist or something.
Right.
They can't teach in a Tibetan monastery because they're at Inji,
Right. Right.
and nobody's going to listen to them, and they don't even speak Tibetan that well, most of them at all. To teach a bunch of Tibetans, they want to teach lamas. They don't want some Westerner.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, you sort of give them the enlightenment thing. Oh, you're enlightened 3 years, 3 months, 3 days, and you did all these things, hopping through hoops. And now what? Go live with grandma,
Yeah.
And a couple of them were really quite stressed out about it that I knew. So
Yeah.
I said to the Nyoshu Ken, senior one, who
Mhm.
therefore, and he was not well, and he passed away through it, that he knew he wasn't trying to make an empire like they do. And I said, shouldn't you, someone sincerely wants to do that, and you think they really have the affinity to do it, but why don't you, but they're Westerners, why don't you, sign them up, schedule them for 2 or 3 years down the road,
Mhm.
put them to Naropa or some such place like that,
Yeah.
and get an MA, learn the language, get an MA, learn about Tibetan history, and of course do some practice and some meditating, but they've committed to come back to you. And then when they have an MA or MPhil, then they come and do 3-year retreat, and then they write a dissertation.
Yes.
And
That's a
then they
great
get
idea.
that degree, or if they go the counseling level, they've already done some stuff, and they already can be like the Ken McLeod, that guy in California.
Uh-huh.
There's some people who are college students who are psychotherapists, and they
Right.
can make a living that way, and they don't have to try to become a guru, and play the guru game.
Yeah.
And maybe a few will, and that's also good. And they make a center and they do that, but many of them won't be able to do that because you produce a lot of them.
Right.
So why don't you do that? And he said that is the right idea, and he instructed Tukapema Wangya right then and there. That's what you should do, Rinpoche, he says.
Yeah.
And I said, well, and then Rinpoche looks at me and says, well, can you take them at Columbia? And I said, well, no, Columbia is sort of more straight sort of place. It would depend on their other academic record, I said, whereas sometimes you'll get people who didn't have a big academic record, but you think they're really amazing, and that's fine. And then they can go to more Buddhist place like Naropa or CIIS in California or something like that. I would try maybe to make a program like that in an Ivy League place, but it's really difficult because the credentialing is a problem with that in many cases,
Mhm.
I said. But anyway, I would help you any other way I could raise funds, whatever it is. But you guys are good at fundraising. You have a castle there in France, but constantly producing these people, and then issuing them forth on the world, and then some of them just don't know what to do. And but they didn't develop a muscle. Then he, of course, in front of Nyoshu Ken, is okay. Lola said, "Oh, Lola's will do that. Yeah, okay, let's work on that." Blah blah. And zero effort in that direction. Zero.
Mm.
So there should be other ways. And actually, what I'm doing nowadays, which some people tried to do here and there's some people in Europe tried to do this, and one notorious example of a guy who tried to do it here unsuccessfully, and that is there's all these hatha yoga people,
Yes.
and they also have their own scandals and their own guru bullshit.
Yeah.
And actually, as it turns out, I'm so flipped out. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, has
Mhm.
what he calls a fourth aim in life, and that is because he claims it would be unfilial of him not to do something great for India, who has been so kind to him and the other exiles. So what he wants to do is bring back Indian Buddhist inner science, Nangirpa or Dhyatma Vidya, back to India in a form that Indians can embrace it as their own thing. They won't think it's a Tibetan invasion or they have to be Buddhist, so it won't be a denominationalist sort of assault on Hinduism. If he doesn't ever want to convert anybody, His Holiness, and he asked them to leave his people alone, actually.
Yeah.
And so that's what he wants to do. But what I've been discovering doing this Vajra yoga enterprise that I'm trying to do with some yogi people who are really turned on to both good hatha yogis. They're graduated in various ways, and they are also really into the Tibetan thing. I'm discovering that from the beginning, hatha yoga is half Buddhist anyway.
Yeah,
It's totally there's a book by a guy named Gokhale, which I'm advertising for him, putting in plugs for him. Pradeep Gokhale, he's a professor at Pune. And did you realize that the Yoga Sutras themselves, although Patanjali is placed back with the Sutrakaras,
Yeah.
6 of them, back a little bit after Buddha's time, around 4th BCE. But nobody really knows that. And the text of the Yoga Sutras, the aphorisms, is embedded in a commentary that itself is current Sanskrit, classical Sanskrit of the 4th century AD,
Yeah, that's right.
or CE, as we say in religious studies,
That's
Common Era. And that half of the sentences and the discussions in the commentary, and even some of the phraseology in the sutras, in the aphorisms, are straight out of Asanga and Vasubandhu's Yogacara writings.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's like almost the original source. Of course,
Yeah.
there's an admixture of Sankhya dualism in there. And of course, there's an admixture, even in Buddhism, there's
Sure.
Theravada dualism. There's Hinayana or Theravada Buddhism.
Yeah.
I don't like Hinayana expression. I call it individual vehicle, not
Right,
lesser.
right.
But there is a trace of that. But still, there's a lot of, and the highest thing you can attain in Hatha Yoga is Dharma Mega Bhumi.
Yeah.
And where's Dharma Mega come from? That's the Dasha Bhumika Sutra. That's the highest 10th stage of Bodhisattva.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Dharma Mega.
Yeah.
And if you're really Sankhya, if you're a heavy Sankhya, you don't want to be a Dharma Mega. You want to get the hell out of the universe.
That's right.
So it's really fun. And then at the other end, where you have the Vajrayana, Shaivism, Shaiva Tantra, and then the medieval Hatha Yoga after Buddhism has been burned down by the Muslims. Institutional Buddhism has been burned down.
Yeah.
There's this famous book, Amrita Siddhi, and there's Jim Mallinson. You know his work?
Don't you remember this email? I sent you that Amrita Siddhi from Jim Mallinson.
You did? I didn't know that. I forgot that. Sorry. Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. You're doing exactly what I wanted you to do with it.
Oh, good.
I couldn't do it. Nobody's listening to me.
I'm very glad. Well, I took Jim Mallinson's course. He has a yoga studies course.
Yeah. Oh, so you met Jim.
Because, he was, I didn't meet him, but I just online. It's online, and we corresponded.
Yeah. Good.
Met him. But you have met Jim Mallinson? You know it?
No, but I emailed him a lot of time back in the day. I was going to do this at Rajung Yeshe. I started a PhD there, and then I dropped it. This is what I wanted to study, and I saw he was doing the work. I was like, well, I don't need to do it anymore.
Oh, that's right. Now I remember that. Yes, that was you. That was
me.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. That's really great.
Thank you.
But anyway, we're trying to make a kind of diploma for the people, because Tibet House New Delhi gives a kind of diploma with a signature by head of the Dharamsala Religion and Culture Office, which is non-sectarian, right? They have even Bumbos in there. They have Jodang Bas. They have everybody in there. It's really remade, that office. And so I'm good. I haven't formalized it with Dadul, Geshe Dadul, whatever, Dorji Dadul, who's Damdul, who's the head of Tibet House Delhi, the mother of Tibet House. But they give a diploma, and they teach people in South America and all over the world, and they get a kind of diploma. And then the Yoga Alliance gives a Hatha Yoga diploma for anatomy and teaching the asanas and so on. So we're trying to merge these things, because then we have yogis and yoginis, more yoginis than yogis, but we have yogis and yoginis who have really opened up some chakras and things, and they need to know things. And the one thing they don't have, because of Indian inner science without the Buddhist part of it, doesn't have the bodhisattva vow, the compassion or focus,
right?
Just because Brahmanism has that hierarchical caste system and so on, so they don't really have that. And that's what I discovered. Since now I'm your disciple, so I'm reporting back to the guru. That's good. And what I discovered is, why don't they have that? Well, I'll tell you why. Because Vishnu or Krishna and Shiva, they want you to share his mind, maybe. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But they don't need another Shiva or another Vishnu, because he's doing the whole job on his own. He's the savior, right?
Yeah, of course.
So you have a monotheistic idea. So, God doesn't need God doesn't need another Jehovah. He sends you Jesus, but only one of them. And then he doesn't need you to be Jesus unless you're a mystic, and then you go against the Orthodox, right? And similarly, Muhammad doesn't need you to be another Allah. Follow me? And similarly, Vaishnavas and Shaivas, etc., they don't need you to be another one. So you don't have a vow like, I'm going to be Shiva and save all beings, just like Shiva does, because he needs more Shivas. So that is a huge difference, you know. And but it can be put innocently because you can say, well, they do have injunctions to be compassionate, and Krishna is a lover boy,
Yeah.
and etc. They have bhakti, and so everybody loves Shiva too, and especially Uma we like more than Shiva, and Ganesha and so on. So the bhakti, and then bhakti comes from the bodhisattvas. Bhakti doesn't come out of the Vedas.
Oh, really?
No way. There's not one Vedic god who's worth an ounce of bhakti. Not
Mm.
a single one. The Vedic gods are scary. It's
Yeah.
like they want sacrifice, and you
Oh, the
don't want to
Vedic
fuck
gods.
with them.
Yes, 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 yes.
Do you know what I mean? That they love you, and no
Yeah.
matter what, and then you should love them back because they love you so much. That's just not happening. In fact, the Krishna of the Bhagavad Gita, which still keeps the sort of Vedic Brahminical thing, because it's part of you know, the Krishna tells Arjuna, we don't need you to be some sort of Siddhartha.
No,
Use
they
you,
don't want him to
kick
go
the
save
shit
his
out of your
enemies.
enemies. You're a
Yeah.
warrior, and don't worry because I'm killing them. And I'll save everybody later. Do you know what I mean? So he doesn't tell Arjuna, yeah, I want you to be another Krishna
No.
because I need more. I need an army of Krishnas to save all these infinite numbers of beings. Like the Buddha and the Bodhisattvas.
Yeah.
So India is actually the stupid academics pretend that Nagarjuna and company invented the Mahayana because the monks were so boring and they didn't have any sex and it was really boring and therefore they were getting really unpopular. So then they invented and made a divine Buddha, like a Mahayana non-dual Buddha.
Oh
So
my
they
God.
started competing with Vishnu and Shiva and with Bhakti and everything. So Hindus start everything,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Vedas, and they started all it. That's just the opposite, actually. It's the total opposite, because the Buddha thing is a revolutionary thing. Everybody's equal. Your latrine washing untouchable can actually be
Well,
Buddha.
I mean,
So that's really anyway. That's what I've been trying to do, and I thank you so much. You are the one who told me we should bring them to the Vajra Yoga thing, and said that's right. But we
yeah.
didn't have the funds to invite Mallinson, and I don't know if you realized that. If you had realized that, I don't know how well you had studied his stuff, but if you know about Sanderson, his
Yes.
teacher, but what he discovered
Mhm.
about Amrita City undercut what Sanderson's lifelong thesis is. And it all comes from Shaivism, which
Right.
he's influenced by some Kashmiri teacher that Shaivism is everything.
Yeah.
So, he, by discovering this book that comes out of the Vajrayana rather than out of
Yeah.
Shaivism, he was like overthrowing his teacher's lifelong,
Yeah.
polemic.
And that's
You
what I
know,
thought was great about him, because he had no skin in the game. Like, he wasn't coming from a Buddhist background. It was very innocent that he found this. He
I
wasn't
know,
like
but
trying to
well,
manipulate.
now I think he's getting that because he made this great statement in the course. I don't know if you heard him say that. I love it. He said the Siddhas, and
Uh-huh.
especially because he focused very much on this Gadri temple. Did you know that one in Mangalore? Did you
Yeah,
read
with
that?
all the reliefs and everything.
With
Yeah.
all the Buddhist bodhisattvas that they think is Shiva
Right.
currently, but it was a big monastery. And I don't know if you know that, but the mystery of Chandrakirti, the great Madhyamaka writer and the great tantric commentator from our point of view. I don't give a
Right.
fuck about their nonsense dating. They're just completely silly. These guys
Yeah.
because precisely they don't think anybody's enlightened. You see, so they're all just all the Buddhist masters read Foucault,
Yeah.
and so they're all seeking power and legitimacy and doing fake things, and they also they don't have a good Christian ethics, so they lie all the time about it.
Yeah.
I wrote, Buddha said it, and meanwhile they wrote the Prajnaparamita themselves,
Yeah.
which is ridiculous. Nagarjuna wasn't getting royalties for the Prajnaparamita, And Nagarjuna wrote his own books, plenty excellent books that nobody
Yeah.
has ever overthrown since. And he did discover that Prajnaparamita Sutra for sure. I don't know from Naga Kingdom or what that means even, but he did. So, and they're rude, and it's very self-contradictory because if the Buddhist monks were so unpopular and these guys were such huge charismatics as to come up with the Avatamsaka Sutra and the Prajnaparamita Sutra, blah blah blah, then they don't need to legitimize themselves with a bunch of unpopular Buddhist monks. They could make any new kind of Hinduism.
Well, the whole Vedanta, Veda Vedanta, was to try to put Buddhism back into a bottle and keep it in a hierarchical. Like Sankara, who was one of the great founders of the Veda Vedanta, said the Buddha Shakyamuni was the greatest yoga of this kalapa.
Yes. Sure, because his grand teacher was Gaudapada.
Yeah.
And Gaudapada's Mandukya Upanishad commentary is salutes Buddha and Brahma both, or Vishnu, I guess, Buddha and Vishnu, whatever, So yes, but Shankara, they claim Shankara, but of course in the Buddhist story about Shankara, it's on the third time he was defeated by Dharmakirti. He really did become a Buddhist, and of course Ramanuja, twice he killed himself. And then he was so brilliant that by teenage time he'd be debating again.
Yeah.
So, and the Brahmins used to stake in Vedic debates, that whole thing about your head gets split in 7 pieces. They would commit suicide if they lost a debate, one of those formal debates. But Dharmakirti said, no suicide. He's not going to debate with the stake of your life. The stake is your ideology. So if you lose, you have to study the other guy's teaching. That's when you swallow your pride, in other words. You can't arrogantly kill yourself.
I mean, it just seemed like a bunch of state propaganda.
What?
It just seemed like a bunch of state propaganda to refute Buddhism, and as they got stronger.
Well, yeah, but it was the propaganda of some fanatic monotheists, but the
Right.
Indians are a little more relaxed about different visions of divinity than the Westerners.
But they still had the whole.
And it was but the main thing always was the caste system.
That's what I mean.
They never wanted to have the relativization of the caste system.
Right.
That's what really freaked them out. And it still does. They still kill an untouchable who goes and drinks in their well.
Sure.
In their village somewhere. That will still happen today.
Sure.
In Bihar or UP or something. It will.
Yeah.
And they're really bad. And when they convert to Buddhism, sometimes a whole village would come and they'd try to murder them, the Brahmins.
Right.
When they would come and convert at Bodh Gaya or something. That has happened in our lifetimes. So anyway, that's Brian. Now that's so cool.
Well, that was right before COVID. Things got crazy, right?
That's really good. I love that. Thank you. So you never came to Menla or anything. You never joined us.
I did. I went there for the Dr. Nita thing, and Dr. Nita, and I
Okay.
did. That's what I'm saying. I was a fan of getting true core and stuff into the public. And
yeah, well, have you noticed that Dr. Nita's kind of joined up in the Vajra Yoga thing? He really wants to help it along.
That's exactly right. That's exactly.
Isn't it great?
Yes.
And he decided, he took a retreat last fall.
Yeah, the 6-month retreat.
Yeah, and during the retreat, he took a lot of initiations online with His Holiness from his place in Rome. And His Holiness has a lot of initiations online that only you can access in a special Tibetan section of YouTube, which Westerners don't know about. And there's some really juicy ones in there, Fifth Dalai Lama stuff and so on. And he always likes the Fifth Dalai Lama because Fifth Dalai Lama was a big Nyingma. Gangsha Rangdol was his name. Yeah. Which I learned from, I didn't know that before Dr. Nita, what his name was, Gangsha Rangdo. Whatever arises liberates itself. That was the name of Fifth Dalai Lama, as far as Nyingmas go. And then he found out that Dalai Lama said that Tsongkhapa practiced Dzogchen, and Dzogchen helped him in his final levels there. And he received that from the Lotak Kenshin Namkha Gyaltsen. I don't know if you know that story, who the Gelupas prayed to, because he stopped Tsongkhapa and his 8 companions of their 5-year retreat. He stopped them from going to India in the end of the 14th century, which would have been unhealthy. I mean, a bunch of them would have died, and there was no Buddhism really in India at that time. Muslim domination. But they were so gung ho and so flipped out, from their retreats and all their visions. They wanted to go to Shakyamuni to go pilgrimage, But he stopped them. And then he taught Dzogchen, and there's a book that tells about that. And Tsongkhapa and Dalai Lama was saying that in one of those initiations, and so he really fell in love with Dalai Lama. He always liked him, but he really fell in love with him during that retreat. So when he came back, he was like, "Okay, Vajra Yoga, let's do it." And then he really liked Tsongkhapa,
I thought that was because of you.
Yeah, because they also like him. Some of them, who are less sectarian than some other ones of them. Yeah. But some of them like him because Shabgar said, Guru Rinpoche said he was Tsongkhapa. Shabgar said that, he wrote that. And Shabgar had a vision or something. It's a great Shabgar. Anyway, but the other thing that's so funny, that Sanderson, with all of his Shaivism and all of his Amrita Siddhi, I think Jim also didn't discover that until later, because he's still not quite. Even when he taught the course, he wasn't quite coping with that. But anyway, there are several versions of the Amrita Siddhi, which were already translated into Tibetan.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And Malazan agrees that Virupa wrote it. And that's where, and Konkana coast, you see, the Konkana coast from Mumbai down to Mangalore, including Goa, that all that beachfront, that was where all the tantrikas were, you know. That was a really big tantrika place, you know.
Yeah,
As it was for the hippies, you know. Now it's all the hotels. I've seen a little of it, not much. But when I was there in the beginning of the 70s, I was camped out on Anjuna Beach, and there was nothing but a few fishermen and a bunch of hippies, German hippies, drug smugglers, you know, fixing their VWs before another run through Iran and Afghanistan. So packing the walls of their VWs with the hash and whatever.
yeah.
And they were enjoying themselves, having taken a break in Goa, you know. That was
Wow,
like,
you've lived such a cool life.
so that was the thing. So what else?
Well, yeah, so I
I'm
wanted
so thank you so much. I'm so happy. I just didn't connect the pieces.
no. Thank you so much for
I'm a
talking.
little elderly now.
No. You're. I wanted you to talk a little bit about Madhyamaka. So, like I said, we're coming from a place of embodiment. Like the view is most Westerners are disembodied. Like their thoughts are basically their identification,
Yes.
and there's really no sense of body consciousness. And you know, so or then they do body practices, but they don't understand the consciousness and how these things fit together.
I
So
know, but you know, we were in this unique time of history.
yeah,
There was a wonderful thing. I don't know if you ever met Sasaki Roshi, the one in Los Angeles.
yeah, no,
He died 108 not long ago,
mm-hmm.
but he retired 20 years or 30 years before that. He was like a little Chihuahua dog, like a pug, actually, but there's no hair, you know, like that kind of pug. He really was like that. But he was really brilliant, and he had such a powerful field.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I met him, I walked into an auditorium. He was giving a talk up on a stage, and it was full of people, and I walked in late. The whole room was went upside down. And I was like this because I was hanging from the ceiling. You know, there was such a powerful disorientation field around him, you know, shattering all the conviction about this solid world around us. You know, it was amazing. Guy. Anyway, why did I mention him? Oh yeah, he had this professor from Kyoto University. He invited, and he gave this speech which put everyone to sleep really, until the very end. He was talking about the 5 great renaissances of Buddhism on the planet. And of course, it was Shakyamuni himself, and it was the emergence of Mahayana. And then he completely switched to East Asia. Then it was Tang Dynasty, and then it was Kamakura period in Japan, right? And then I was arguing with him. I said, what about Tibet? And what about Pala Dynasty India? You're going to do Tang, you're going to do post-Gupta India when the Tantrikas were going crazy. Oh, no, that's Tantra. No. That's all corruption. No. Can't do that. No, I get all dirty stuff. You know. No. But anyway, he a little bit listened to me, actually, because later I went to Kyoto, and he kind of agreed after a while. But at the time, he was saying that. So then people tried to wake up at the end. It's so slow and translation and everything. And so, but finally, that was okay. Professor Nagao said, "What's the 5th one?" And he says, "5th one is America." He says, and it's America, and the Renaissance in America is going to feed back into all the Buddhist countries, where Buddhism has become just a sort of ritual routine, more or less. You know, he said. So everybody was fainting over that. You know, it's really cool. And but that's not because we're so great. It's because we're so crazy, and we're so deluded, and the materialism is a complete, ridiculous piece of nonsense. That is supposed to be so wise and sensible and modern. And it's great, and it actually is destroying the planet. It actually takes no cognizance of nature. There's no sense of responsibility that you're going to have a consequence for what you do.
Yes.
Really, as a whole global culture now, because we conquered all the Japanese and China, everybody. They're all just a bunch of materialist idiots, wrecking everything. Because they think they can get away with it. No one is going to send them to hell. They're not going to be reborn in a nuclear, like radiated slag heap or coal dust regulated slag heap.
There you go.
You know what I'm saying? So there's no real ethic. Whereas supposedly the superstitious karma these bullshitters say is actually Darwin ahead of time by 3,000 years. 2,500 years. Before Buddha, there was no such thing, connecting your biology to your ethics. So you kill and you're going to become a rhinoceros or a crocodile or something that just eats what's in front of it with great efficiency, Chigla chiksa, anyonya bhakshana, they say, one eating another, the suffering of the animal kingdom. You're not going to stop and think, oh, I better not eat this one because they're nice or something. I'll be a vegan. They're not going to think that. They're just going to eat whatever they can catch. And that's not a human thing. So what I'm saying is, and talk about body now. So now we're here. Now, everybody who went anywhere, I don't know about you, you say you wandered around and you left home, but most people took acid.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was psilocybin or something.
Yeah.
And that brought them right into their body and their subtle body. And some of them freaked out and fell in a hole.
Yeah.
And some of them, like stupidly, like Tim himself, Tim Leary, he just said, oh, just keep taking it. It doesn't even matter what you take, just take a big enough dose.
Yeah.
And Ram Dass, he didn't bump into some enlightened people. Like Ram Dass bumped into my old Mongolian teacher for quite a while. If you go look and be here now. And then he met Guruji in India, which pushed him over. But he was also dealing with the Buddhists before that. So I'm just saying, so that's a bunch of people who are ripened in a certain way, and they're kind of nutty, and they see the world going down the drain, so they have a kind of existential thing of like, well, we better make some meaning. We got to make some meaning out of all of this. And we're not going to just cater to it, and that's one. And then have 1 billion of them, or 50 million of them are doing hatha yoga, which is using their body, taking responsibility for their health, stopping their own arthritis by doing downward dog so they don't get arthritis in their hip joint at 55 and have a metal hip put in there, or take Ecotrin from those ads. They have no arthritis medicine, Western medicine. There's not 1 ounce of it. They don't know. But there are good Tibetan pills for arthritis, actually. And Tibetan, Western doctors who work with Tibetan refugees, they prescribe the Tibetan pills for arthritis. But anyway, so I'm saying we have a group of people who could be real Vajra yogis now, and that could be a kind of renaissance. And the second thing is, we stupidly think we're the great individualists of all time. Meanwhile, we're total daddy lovers. Look at this Trump and this Hitler and Trump and Putin. These are all because people grow up with the authoritarian monotheistic thing subliminally in their consciousness, and they want to have somebody else save them. And so therefore we have all this guru cult crap, and that corrupts the teachers from Asia who are not really fully there themselves, but there are some good ones who are, but too many of them get sucked in.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it wrecks them, and they start taking their God. And Indian, Japanese, Tibetan, doesn't matter. And so we're going to do this, You guys, you're younger. I'm too old. I'm retired. But you guys are going to do that. Yeah, well, they translated the insane and irrational absolutization of God, and the insanity of thinking that an absolute can create a relative and control it without relating to it, while remaining absolute, which is, it's a misuse of language, as my beloved Wittgenstein would say. And similarly, that I'm going to go into nothing as if nothing were a place, is similarly a misuse of language, and they're stuck on that with a fundamental disconnect in their own mind. A psychotic break of thinking in their own of connecting their thoughts in their own mind. And so, by throwing out God to escape the preachers and hell, they still have deified nothingness and absolutized nothingness, and that makes them depressed actually, and then they become destructive of nature and themselves. So that's the sickness they have. So if he's onto that, that's good. But in a way, I don't hate materialism, on the other hand.
Yeah.
In other words, the scientific method of being empirical and saying, like Popper, saying that every theory or law of nature is a hypothesis awaiting falsification by further experience, and therefore experience outweighs theory.
Yes.
That's Dignagian epistemology, Dharmakirtian epistemology. That's 1,500 years behind Dignaga and Dharmakirti, which go back to Buddha actually, but they articulated it more fully in a philosophical manner. But that's an old discovery there, but they caught up to that, and that's good. And their discovery and sort of analysis of material, of course, has led them back around in quantum to
Mhm.
realizing the mind is a force in nature,
Yes.
and it connects to energy, and further. But my final answer nowadays that I'm saying is I'm also I'm not for Vijnanavada, which is too much dominates East Asian also Buddhism,
Mhm.
is because of Xuanzang,
Mhm.
deifying Dharmapala, and the Yogacara or Vijnanavada people.
Mhm.
And the Madhyamaka China didn't get, except for Jizang, the East Asia didn't really get strong Chandrakirti. They didn't get any Shantarakshita. They didn't get any of the really powerful Madhyamaka writers, and so they got into this mind only stuff too much. And the point is, mind and matter are a pair in language, all these languages, and in a way, to say it's all one or it's all the other makes it meaningless, because
Yes.
they only give each other meaning
Right.
as a pair.
Yeah.
And of course, the Buddhists say that finally they're the same thing in the sense of the chi and the mind are the same, which means you can, in some context, act like it's all matter, and in another context, you can act like it's all mind. But
Yeah.
realizing that both of those things are none of them final, because there's no verbal theory that is final. Ultimately, reality is inexpressible and beyond theory, but it is not inaccessible to experience.
That's right.
And rational scientific analysis will lead you to the gateway of experience. If you throw away that rational scientific analysis, the prajna analysis beforehand, you'll just be stuck with your subliminal egotism, and you'll never get out of it.
Perfect. Beautiful.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
So, what Buddhism can do now
Yes.
in academia is it can reawaken Western metaphysics, but it's this physical philosophy to really match the good methodology that the materialists do have a good methodology. They crippled themselves at this stage, though, by
Mhm.
reverting to this dogmatic materialism. In other words, they take the theistic dogma and they slam it onto nothingness and matter. Even though they have now discovered since 1926, now almost a century, 4 years short of a century, they discovered it was announced to them by the people investigating it that there is no objectivity in nature. There's
Right.
no intrinsic objectivity in nature. Nature is what you make of it.
Yes.
And the uncertainty principle means that your mind interferes with what you're observing. So
Yes.
that means the mind has a force.
Yes.
And that's why, and when Einstein said God does not play dice, he was acting like, oh, if we can't pin down particles of matter and have something to control them and control things with our theories,
Mhm.
then God will be upset and it'll be all come random and be chaos. That's
Mhm.
what that he pretends to say, or maybe he thinks that. But what it really is he's unwilling to accept his own responsibility in constructing
Right.
reality, and all of our responsibility in constructing it, which we mutually do through our interconnection and our culture and our language.
And that takes a lot of responsibility on the person, though. And if you're not living ethically, then you have to deal with your own actions. And if they're not pretty going into meditation, that can be repulsive, and you don't want to have
That's
to deal
right.
with that.
So modern philosophy has been castrated and disemboweled
Yes.
by these materialists, because they somehow have convinced them and themselves that matter is the only thing that matters, is an empirical discovery rather than a dogmatic assertion. And it isn't an empirical discovery, because the discovery is that they couldn't find any matter. And they know that thing about the boson and that bullshit in the papers, in order to build themselves another $40 billion,
Yeah.
subway, magnetic subway they could smash atoms in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're smart, those guys. They moved it from Switzerland down
Right.
to Provence, where they have better vegetables,
Yeah.
and nice cappuccino. Because they sit up top there and they eat the vegetables and the cappuccino while the atoms go crashing around. And 40 billion bucks they got out of pretending that they found the key to mass. Meanwhile, there's no key to mass.
Yeah.
Einstein's mass disappears with the speed of light into infinity. So therefore, mass dissolves under analysis too. So they don't have to pin it down. You can surf it without pinning it down. That's the point.
Well,
And you
but
and
that's
then
the experience.
and then release your experience and your
Yes,
balance, and then you're surfing life, and you're going to be happy.
that's
And
right.
you'll fix the nature, and you'll fix nature, because you'll want to surf it. You don't want nature to not have waves.
Yeah.
You know, in the Lotus Sutra,
I know the Lotus.
there's a one guy who gets really excited after seeing the giant stupa come up out of the ground.
Yeah.
And the dead Buddha, the mummy, that's the
Mhm.
return of the mummy, the Buddhist version. No, it is. It's a mummy in there. In
Yeah.
that big stupa, there's a mummy. That Prabhutaratna Buddha is a mummy. And then Buddha, and I swear, in the sutra itself,
Mhm.
when Buddha opens the door on the harmika,
Mhm.
the little niche in the giant stupa that's like 11 meters high or something, or not, like
Yeah.
kilometers high, whatever it is. The audience, I guess, levitates up to be able to see it. I don't know how,
Mhm.
right? It's a miracle. He pulls the bolt back, and
Mhm.
there's actually a creak sound, like a rusty bolt, like, ah, really? Then he opens the gate, and then this mummy is sitting there. And that mummy says, "Greetings, Shakyamuni. I'm so glad now, obviously, you're going to be teaching the Lotus Sutra, because then I'm here, because that was my vow, that I'll come back in a mummy, as a mummy in a stupa, anytime any Buddha teaches the Lotus Sutra on any humanoid planet.
Mhm.
So here I am, so you're going to be doing it. So sit down and give it a teach." Yes. And so you have the live Buddha and the dead Buddha
Yeah.
sitting together, teaching that. And then, he says everything is perfect. There's a Buddha in every atom. He gives like a Avatamsaka kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is this one guy, young Bodhisattva's there, and he sees this, and he's flipping out, and he proclaims himself. He stands up himself, and he says to Shakyamuni, "Oh, the Lotus revelation is so great. I love it. No more of this suffering, cause, nirvana, eightfold path. There's no suffering. Buddha bliss is everything. There's everything is fine. Buddha's body is everywhere. This kind of the opposite of the Four Noble Truths.
Yeah.
So so Buddha says, "Calm down. It's okay. Good, great. I'm glad you're enthused,
Yeah.
but calm down. Don't worry. Look around." And then he looks around, and then he's kind of humbled, but he's also happy because he sees bodhisattvas who are just as capable as him, or maybe some of them rather more so, coming out of the ground like blades of grass, as
Yeah.
far as the eye can see in every direction. So this may be what is going to be happening now, I swear. Well, I don't know if you ever saw, but in my Vajra Yoga thing, which I hope to be able to get people some sort of certification eventually, maybe after my death, there's a huge ethics thing. And the putting forward what you can see exemplified by the Dalai Lama, not necessarily some other lamas, but some, yes, but not always. It's a sort of Kalyana Mitra thing, where yes, maybe in the ritual, I'm a big channeling Buddhas to you,
Mhm.
but in between, you don't have to be my chauffeur. You don't have to mess with me. You don't have to do favors for me. That's not really the guru worship. As Dr. Nita says, guru puja
Mhm.
just means you have, really the only root of it is gratitude if you learned anything. And then you want to honor a person who helped you so much that you learned something. There's no reason that that's not going to make you enlightened by being dependent on some other person. And in fact, the tantric ritual, where they say you have to see the guru and the Buddha and the deity as the same being, the reason for that is when you feel like a piece of shit because your own self is filled with stupid things.
Yeah.
But the tantra is like Chan, like just sitting. You have to. You're under pressure of that gold vehicle methodology. In other words, you're not only using your deconstructive mind to break through toward emptiness, toward your notion of emptiness, because actually you're already in emptiness,
Yes.
right? Matter is emptiness. This is emptiness right here. You're not getting away from here to emptiness.
Mhm.
That space experience is a good experience, but it's not emptiness until you bring it back right here in the middle, and you still can hit the table, and that's emptiness. Then you're somewhere. So the point is, the only purpose of that thing about the guru relationship changing from the Kalyana Mitra relationship is because you're under pressure then to take responsibility yourself to be a Buddha and a Bodhisattva and whatever, and live Buddha is as Buddha does,
Mhm.
and not act like you're higher than other people because you had a little experience in a meditation. In fact, you're their servant. That's the key
Yeah.
thing. The servant of the student, the one who genuinely wants to learn, is
Yeah.
the high one in the teacher-student relationship. Teachers just anything they can think of that helps them get there, right?
Yeah.
And then Geshe-Wanga, Mr. Miyake Geshe-Wanga used to tell me when I was really appreciative of learning, I got some aha, in something he was telling me about something. And when I wasn't pissed off with him about something he was not telling me. And when I would do that, so there'd be a moment of like appreciation. And he'd say, well, yeah, okay. He said, but I'm not just teaching you. I want you to help other people. If you get anything, you go help other people. So you're just a vessel. Okay, it's not just for you. So you're like, what are you doing about livelihood? You're just a total mendicant still, I can tell. Well, I would really like you, and I should, because of your way you already benefited me, but I would like you to be part of a kind of council, Vajra Yoga council, that we create gradually and slowly.
Yeah.
And we might bring in like some lamas if we decide they're not trying to make empires for themselves only. I mean, they can also make their own little center because they have livelihood issues. They're refugees, but that's not their main concern, But we help them. Tibet House Tibet House is not is a cultural center, not a religious center. So we have all the lamas go teach there, and then if they get popular, they go off and make their own Dharma center, and that's fine too. Yeah. So we do that too. But I would like to have this council of where we're taking responsibility ourselves. We've had the Sogel catastrophe, we had the Trungpa catastrophe, we're having Trungpa's son catastrophe still ongoing. That that guy, which I predicted. I begged the guy who gave him the initiation as the Sikyong or whatever it's called, to not do that because it would lead to another crisis, cult crisis. But he wouldn't listen to me. He said he agreed with me in a way, but that's Rob Rinpoche, Nyingma guy. But he agreed with me kind of logically. But he said he had to do it because his grandfather had done it for Trungpa himself. I said, well, look what that, because he doesn't know what happened in American culture because of that. So I know. So they all do some good anyway before they burn and they crash and burn. Like Sogil did some good. They all do some good. But unfortunately, some students get really pissed off and then they diss Buddhism. They freak out. That's what's bad, and they think that that is Buddhism, and then they hate it. That's very, very bad sin. To get people to turn away from Dharma because a teacher misbehaved. That's really bad. Anyway, they could turn back from the teacher, but they shouldn't turn against the Dharma. So anyway, that's what it is. There's a lot of... So anyway, I hope you'll do that. Think about it, please.
Yeah, of course.
This advisory council at this point.
Thank you so much, of course.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I would love to work with you. I'd be honored. Yeah. Thank you so much.
I'm really delighted catching up, and thank you for reminding me about all that stuff. And I love it. And you're on our council.
All right.
Take care. Good night. Thank you very much.